Good evening, and welcome to the podcast. It is a fresh Tuesday night. Pastor Ford was out last week, and so he's returned. Obviously, we did something a little different last week, and as usual, every time Pastor Ford is back, fresh topic, straight from the heart, and open conversation for folks to join in. So we encourage you to join the chat and ask questions, answer questions, because I love posting questions, so that way you folks have something to just kind of chew on and think about, and then we can throw our thoughts on the table and talk about them. And so tonight we are going to move in that direction. But before I start off here, I was wondering if there's anything you wanted to tell us about the trip. Is there any updates, any cool things that happened,
Well, I was able to preach in a church in Kentucky, which I've never been to Kentucky before, so that was another opportunity for that. That was very good. I enjoyed doing that. Able to hang out for a week with my daughter, who was in isolation.
So you didn't really hang out with her much, did you?
And so, she was able, so other than the first 2 days, I think it was, so Thursday and then Friday, Saturday, I think, she had to be behind closed doors. She couldn't have anybody within 6 feet of her, so she had the doors completely closed and just shoveling food in. But she, I think it was either, I was gone most of Sunday, but I think she was able to have the door open, so we were able to just kind of hang out at the door talking. And so it's good, but it all is good. I forgot to mention it on Wednesday or Sunday, but her records actually say that there's a way of saying it, but I don't remember exactly how it says, but basically that there is no trace of any kind of malignancy, so she's completely, at this point, completely clean.
And they're saying that that's a result of the procedure she went through with this.
Don't know the answer to that. So, because she did original scan, and then that came back with some question marks on it, and then they did another scan. I don't know if there's been any updates since then or not, but I haven't heard anything if there has been. I don't think there has. But right now the issue is, as far as the doctor's not told her to be careful of anything or worry about anything. It's like, okay, you're good, and then we'll just keep testing you, and see how things progress. The doctor did say there's a possibility that, they gave her, the dosage that they gave her was not a minimal dose, but you can only have so many doses in a lifetime. And so they gave her a dose that basically she can have that dose like 5 more times. Okay. And so through her life. So if there is any reoccurrence, they can still do it. So it's not, they're not, the doctor didn't just roll the dice. It was very conservatively handled. So, and it seems to have been the right thing. So,
well, good. Well,
so
we're glad. She's my sister-in-law, so I know a little bit more of the details here. But it is good that a lot of the news I'm getting from my wife, which is her sister, is very good. So we're glad that all went well so far. So let's talk about our topic tonight. The conflict of need versus desire. I'm not going to totally go into everything that inspired this topic, except to say that it's something I've definitely felt, obviously, in myself, because I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we all feel this conflict. But I started kind of paying attention to just an observation of different people, where different people are in life, in their walk with God and Christianity, and noticing this kind of trend between people who are doing really, really well and people who are either up and down or are just constantly struggling. And so, there's some people who do really well sometimes, and then all of a sudden they kind of go through this rut and they kind of pick back up, and then they go through this rut and pick back up. And it's not always the same struggle, but it is the same struggle when it comes down to this kind of, I don't necessarily want to say it's a root issue, but it's a common issue that if overcome, could, if people overcame this conflict, how different the world would be, obviously, but also if you just took this down to the individual level, how different our lives could be. Or maybe we'll just throw it as a question, rather. How different could our lives be if we were, at least when it came to priority in our lives and what we focused on as our number one thing or focus, if we were to overcome this idea of pursuing desire or pursuing need and necessity and duty, right? What's necessary versus what's desirous. And so I'm listening to a book right now, and I've mentioned it a couple times, but not necessarily drilling in on the book itself, but just the events of the start of the Civil War. There was this specific story, and I looked this up, and so that's why I'm saying I'm not focusing on the book, but I looked up the events surrounding this specific situation. So basically the southern states, a few of the southern states have seceded. They have officially declared they are no longer part of the United States. They're now the Confederate States. They're their own republic. They're going to establish their own government, their own president, and they are now alienating themselves from at the time, what was called the Union, which is the United States. And so South Carolina was one of the states that seceded, and in South Carolina is southern east coast of the United States, and there's a harbor that goes it's called the Charleston Harbor. It's almost like our bay here in the Bay Area, except fairly deep. And there is a little tiny fort that's like literally like an island, and it was set up in such a way that it would guard that harbor from any invaders or enemies coming in. But along the coasts or the shoreline of the harbor, you also had several forts peppered around the outline of that, basically guarding the port as well. So when the southern states seceded, all of those coastal forts now became Confederate forts. They basically, what they did is all the Union soldiers, this one general named Anderson, he pulled all the troops from the couple of forts that were furthest east, pulled them in and consolidated them into Fort Sumter, which is this little island. And so there was one specific story, because now tensions are incredibly high in the United States at the time. And I mean, talk of war is becoming more and more common. And people are, basically President Buchanan is about to hand over the presidency to President Lincoln. He's been elected, and obviously the southern states are highly against President Abraham Lincoln because they don't want him to come against their ability or right, in their eyes, to own slaves and to operate businesses with slaves. So basically, they are ready for war. The southern states are ready for the war. Some of the Union states are ready for war too, but generally speaking, nobody wants a war on the Union side. They're like, we don't want to fight. We want to make this work, and the government is doing everything they can to avoid a war. But the tension is coming around this one situation because Fort Sumter is like this little tiny piece of the Union states left in a southern state. They're surrounded by Confederacy. And so this one situation happens where this boat comes in to basically, it's not marked as a military vessel, but it's coming towards Fort Sumter. It comes into the Charleston Harbor, and its one objective is to bring 200 soldiers. They're all hiding below deck, and a bunch of resupply, tons of food and just clothes and essential equipment for these troops, ammunition, all kinds of stuff to reinforce Fort Sumter just in case anything happens. The problem is these Confederate guard forts basically are like, we're not letting you in, and the reason why is because they raised a flag that was the United States flag, and they were like, you're not allowed in our harbor. This is an enemy vessel now. So they fire on this vessel, and from his vantage point, General Anderson sees all this going down and he's got a choice. The thing about General Anderson is he was or I think he was Corporal, actually, Corporal Anderson. He is a Confederate sympathizer. He's not a Union. He's not for abolition. He's actually for secession. He wants this thing to happen, but he also has a duty and responsibility as a Union military man, and he's sticking to that. I'm not going to betray my country to do this, and so he's stuck with a choice. He can fire to protect this vessel because they are firing on his vessel, right? But the problem is he received no dispatch. There was no warning that they were coming, and so basically what they're doing is almost like, what are you guys doing? Why are you flying this flag? If he fires, he's going to spark a civil war, and he knows it. The other thing is, this supply is needed. They really need this supply. So everything in him is like, gosh, we need to protect these guys because we need what they have. Mm-hmm. But he understands that if I do this, I'm going to spark a war. And so this battle between desire and what is absolutely necessary comes to a head, and he chooses to do nothing, and the ship is forced to retreat, and he's left for a number of months without any resupplies, and they don't even have soap. They're living on their fishing from the harbor. I mean, they're like really getting down to the bare bones of things. And it just, because I'm already working on this topic, it made me think about how common, that's obviously an extreme example, but how common it is that we come to these choices where we're faced with what we really want versus what really is necessary. And so thinking about the Bible, thinking about how things have played out in so many situations, Jesus really is a fantastic example because here he is faced with the cross, what is necessary, what is needed, right, for us as well. But as well, there's the conflict of, if it's possible for this cup to pass, let it pass. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And so what makes, the general question, I'm not asking for an answer just yet, but what makes somebody do something like that? To endure something that maybe they don't want to do but are willing to do, and where they make this crazy it's a transition point where it's no longer what I don't want to do, it becomes what I want to do, right? Does that kind of make sense? And so I want to ask a question to the audience. There are human characteristics, and I can name off a few, but there are human characteristics that keep us from doing what needs to be done. And I'm just going to throw that out as a question. What are some human characteristics that keep us from doing what needs to be done? Just throw them out there, whatever comes to your mind as I'm talking in general. So I'll post that in the chat, see what folks come up with, and we will reason together. And then to kick this whole thing off, is it possible, this is for you, Pastor, is it possible to fall in love with things you don't want to do?
Yes, absolutely. Because, just thinking about the whole, because, in that context and just trying to, spread out from there, often the things that we don't want to do, are because trying to work out, not everything. You don't fall in love with everything, but you can. It's not right across the board. Mm-hmm. Because like in that situation, he's torn between two things that, because the I don't know that I would completely agree that Corporal would be in the situation of what he needs to do as a necessity and what he needs to do or wants to do in terms of desire, because I don't know that I would split it right down the middle, because it's not a it's not a because if he really doesn't care about the Union, then, because we're talking about two, in a sense, two separate governments now. We're not talking about rebelling against the United States of America. We're talking about the United States of America splitting in half almost. I mean, it's not exactly half, but I mean it's a good chunk that could be independent. That's what's happening is the idea of there'll be the North and there'll be the South, and hoping to establish their own rule of law as opposed to the North. And so for that corporal, it's a question of which side do I want to be on.
Yeah.
When it comes right down to it. So it's like, it depends on what your interest, what is your interest? You want to, do you want to, fight for the North, or do you want to fight for the South? I mean,
Yeah.
really, when it comes right down to it. So it's not, and the reason why I say that is because there are things, like, for example, there are lots of things that I do not like to do and I never like doing. And one of those things is doing taxes. I can't stand doing tax. I hate, because of my situation, I can't just fill out a short form and be done with it like I did when I was a kid. I've got all kinds of, because I'm not just a have a W-2 income. It's I have other things, and so I have to itemize. I have to itemize. There's no option about it, and the itemizing is just tedious, and I hate doing it. But it needs to be done, and so I'm never going to fall in love with doing taxes. In fact, the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm too cheap to pay somebody. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, well, maybe I should just do this and get it over with and just call it a loss. But I can do it, and it needs to be done. But also I have to do the monthly books for the church anyway. So it's like, which is another thing I can't stand doing. I hate doing the monthly books. There's nothing exciting about doing it. I don't look forward to it. It's painful because, again, it's tedious. These are things that are tedious. They just need to be done. And so not everything is a that you fall in love with. But but you can fall in love with something that you need to do when that need becomes a desire. So it can switch. It's switched from one to the other. It's not just right away. It's going to happen. It can switch. And in the context of what you were talking about, why is it that some people are victorious as Christians and some are not? And the reason is because there are things that some people want to do that they know they shouldn't do, and that they should have a desire to do the right thing, but don't want to. And those are the people that struggle, because they've never really embraced the idea that, hey, this is the better thing. Living for Jesus, just being a Christian, being saved, is the better thing. And so, like what I preached on, I think it was Sunday morning. Yeah, Sunday morning. Just the idea of, that when you normalize things that are not normal, like I talked about in my sermon, I talked about drinking and smoking and things like that. And that, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, but I struggle with these sins, in my life. And we think that, we normalize that, and we think that that's okay. But the truth is we're living a life that's not victorious. We're not living a life that's enjoyable, because you're always going to be, reaping things, for the stupid stuff that you're doing. You're always poisoning the good in your life, and that's the difficulty, is that idea of, I want to live for God, I want to go to heaven, I want to do all this, but I also have things in my life that are sinful that I want to keep doing. And we think, if I could just overcome these things, if I could just, keep them under control, and maybe I won't do them so much. And we don't understand that we're poisoning the whole thing. And so, but when you discover, through, when you stop doing those things, like for my own self, when I stopped, giving in to the temptations for sin, there was a genuine joy, that became nonstop, and it didn't mean that there weren't problems in life. It's just that the problems were not of my doing. I wasn't sabotaging my own existence. And so then the desire to not sin, became, that it was no longer a necessity to not sin. It was a desire. And so it was something that I loved doing. I wanted to do it.
So, question that just came in that's relevant to what you're saying is, do you think the sense of of accomplishment in the finish? Maybe let me just soften this question a little bit. Maybe love isn't the right, you know, maybe love is a little too narrow, but maybe enjoyment. Is it possible to enjoy things? Maybe you don't love it, but I can enjoy doing something. So let's just add that to the mix. Not
Well,
to
I don't
just
think it
exclude
makes.
one or
Yeah,
the other.
I don't think that makes the answer any better, because
Fair enough.
it's still, you still, you still may not, you still may not find joy in the thing, but I really want to make the distinction when it comes to the topic that we're really dealing with, which is the issue of, why some people are doing well at Christianity and some are not. People that are doing well at Christianity are doing well. People who are not doing well in Christianity are not doing well. So it's not they're not doing well in Christianity, they're doing well in other things. That's
Right,
not
right.
so it's not that kind of a thing. Whereas, where you can have this, some things in life
Yeah.
where, you do it, you don't really like it, you don't get any joy out of it, but there's other things that you can do, like going to work. You can go to work and really hate your job, but, Saturday, I'm going to play basketball, and I really love playing basketball. So I may hate my job, but, I love playing basketball. And so I'll just suffer through my job until I get to go play basketball. And that can work, that can be fine. You don't have to be in love. People who are in love with their job and enjoy what they're doing, that's kind of a bonus.
Yeah.
They just, that's not something that everybody has the opportunity to be able to do. And then there are parts of even when you have a job that you like, then you're still, there's still elements to that, that make it difficult. But again, like I said, you have recreation, you have other options to find your joy. So it's not necessary. But when it comes, and I think that's very important in talking about what we're talking about, the idea of necessity and desire, is that until you understand how important the necessities are of what it means to be a Christian, until you understand how you have to do the necessary things, and then you bear the fruit of those things. Like in my own life, when I look back at my, I'm in my 20s, I'm breaking the law, I'm going, I'm using fake IDs to get into nightclubs, I'm buying illegal substances to get by. I'm because of all this and the party lifestyle, going to nightclubs almost every night of the week. I'm not able to hold a job anymore, and so I'm not holding a job, and so now I have to steal in order to eat because I'm not working anymore. And that whole cycle. When I look back at that and look at where I'm at now, as a dedicated Christian, not just somebody who's delivered. It's not the issue. I thank God I'm delivered. It's not. It's more than that. It's more than just thank God I'm delivered, because I wasn't delivered from everything. There's a lot of things I had to make decisions about not doing anymore. So it wasn't like I shared my testimony. I woke up the next day and I was definitely a different person. There's no doubt about it. I was definitely a different person. I had different desires. I genuinely wanted to stop drinking. But I wanted that before I became a Christian. It wasn't like I didn't want those things. I wanted to get out of that, but there was nothing to get into to get me out of that. It was that this was just life. And so, but looking back on it now, I'm so glad I got unstuck from all that. Even though a lot of the driving force behind all of that was my need to medicate, my existence. And that really was what it was. I needed to do things in order to keep from thinking about, the disaster that was my life. But now I don't need to do that anymore. But that happened because I started doing things that were necessary, like not going to parties anymore. As much as I like going to parties, but not going to parties meant, my friends didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. So I can't keep, relationships with my friends. My friends don't want to have anything to do with me anymore because they want to sin. And I'm trying to make decisions to not sin anymore, and their temptations are too much. And so I'm not hanging around with them anymore. But, so it was like, I just have to do this. It's not an option. If I'm ever going to get out of that, that lifestyle, then I'm going to have to cut my ties with them, and get out of that. And now looking back on it, it's like it was a price worth paying, and now obviously over the years I've made relationships with people who are not like that, who are people who are going in the same direction I'm going in. And so now, it's well worth it, well worth it. And so I love it, I desire it. I love coming and praying. I love reading the Bible. I love coming to church. I love all these things. But it's not, I still have to choose to do them.
Yeah.
It's not like, somebody coming up to me and going, hey, I've got free tickets to Disneyland, free hotel room, and all that you can eat every day. And me going, oh, I got to work this out, see if I really, can go. It's like, that would be great. I just go, but that life isn't like that. Life isn't, this, joyride. But so there are things I have to do, like, look at my watch and keep track of what time it is so I'm not late, going to church or coming to prayer meeting, or getting up at 5:30 in the morning to come to prayer. Those kinds of things. These aren't things that I enjoy doing, and so it's rough actually getting there, sometimes. But once I'm there, then it's worth it, but and I don't know that I'll ever come to a place. I think 41 years is a good test. I don't think I'm ever going to come to a place to where, when my clock, rings 5:30, I'm going to go, yes. Not like I would if it meant getting up at 5:30 to go scuba diving or something like that. It's not, okay, yeah, because number one, I'm not going to do that every day, get up early to go scuba diving. And I don't do that very often. And so it's worth whatever effort, because this is only one day. It's not every day. But I think if I had to get up at like 5 o'clock to go scuba diving every day, I'd eventually feel like I do about going to prayer at 5:30. I don't think it would be any different.
Yeah. Okay, so there was a question asked, do you think the sense of accomplishment in the finished task is enough to motivate you to do what needs to be done? And then you had answered that question. So it says that answers bearing the fruit of having done the task.
Yeah, so, yes, I would say, okay, so we're talking, what you're kind of talking about there is how the human body works, and which is another thing. When you learn these things about how the human body works, you will learn how your mind works and how your body works. It's called dopamine. That's what it's called. It's like when you finish a task, you're successful at achieving something, then there's a dopamine, response. And, that's what makes you feel good. It's like taking a drug, and so your body produces it itself. And so, yeah, exactly. You can get into the habit of success or achieving as a dopamine hit, but that's, you get the same thing from doing drugs or video games or, even criminal activity, has those same, result-oriented buzz. So that's not a good idea to make that your focus, that you're going to do something because you get a buzz off of it. You really need to understand that even though, and I'm not discrediting that, because life isn't about just doing horrible, nasty, necessary stuff. But learning that, the probably the vast majority of life is going to be tedium. It's the little tiny things that you've got to do all the time. And so there's a reality that the dopamine is not really the thing. It's the benefits that come from doing those things, as well, because you have, because if you You might get a dopamine buzz from stealing a car, but when the police come to your door, it's not exactly ideal circumstances for you to think, man, gosh, it's a shame that cops have to come to my house because this stealing a car thing really brings a buzz. And it's not that doesn't work. I mean, it just doesn't work. Whereas doing the things that you need to do, that can become the case, is where there's that level of accomplishment of being able to achieve. That doesn't make the tedium of a thing go away, and it's not so much associated with dopamine as much as it is the reality that your life in general is going to be better, if you give yourself to doing the right things, the necessary things.
Okay, so I'm super glad for all the input and here we got. So I want to go through this. We've got a few characteristics of men, and it's funny because you said it was very relevant. You said that those who aren't doing well in Christianity aren't doing well, and clearly the reason why is because these are character issues that are going to play out in every part of life, not just specific to Christianity, and Christianity also is in every part of your life, so it's not like they're two separate. So thinking about the characteristics, I want to focus on that in a second here. We're at 7:30, but we've got a couple more questions in, so I'm going to get to these first, and then we'll jump to these characteristics and just talk through a few of them. Question is, you say getting up for prayer, etc., is a choice. How do you overcome the obstacles in the way of getting up? In this example, specifically talking about getting up in the morning, but this is a question generally.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's what I'm talking about.
Like, how do you choose if you don't have the strength of mind?
Well, it isn't about a strength of mind. It's anything that we struggle doing is because we have not settled the most important issue, and that is its value, the thing that we're doing. And so that's the problem, and so for me, I know, because I've been a Christian for a while, and I've been through periods of time where I'm not praying, and then my world comes crashing down, and the thought in my mind is, you haven't been praying, so until you're praying, you have no recourse to get upset about how life is going, because you've disengaged from the thing that is part of what makes life work. You get up in the morning and you pray for God's direction, you pray for circumstances, you pray for situations in your life. You're having this conversation with God about your future, and other people's future, and your present, and other people's present. And so, when you wake up in the morning and you go, forget it, I'm not going to pray today. Well, what you're saying is that I don't really care what happens to my life today. I really don't care what happens to my future. I don't care what happens to other people's future. That's not valuable to me. It's not important. It doesn't necessarily play out that way. More often than not, it's like, I don't see the point of prayer anyway. It's more like that, but that is the issue. The issue is that God doesn't move in our lives without prayer. If you're not praying, then life is just going to happen. Yeah. It may be good, it may be bad, but there's nothing steering. There's nobody at the steering wheel. You're just careening down the road of life. And so recognizing that, understanding, I need to pray, and there are times where I come in, and I pray, and I'm praying, and I'm just saying, God, this needs to happen. This just needs to happen, God. I can't go on like this forever. This needs to happen. And so I'm actively participating in the, how things are moving along in my life. And I know that counts, So it's not so much about a strength of mind as much as a conviction about what's important and what isn't important. Because you're really, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more tomorrow, but the idea, really, what we're talking about is a mental laziness. It's not a strength of mind. It's the opposite. It's a laziness of mind that keeps us from doing the things that we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that just happens to be the first one on the list. So let's drill a little deeper on that. Think about laziness for a second. If I'm honest, laziness was actually the first thing I started thinking about when I was working on this.
Well, that's the thing is if you look at your life, anybody who has a life that I was like this, and insert negative thing here, and now I'm like this, insert positive thing here, that person is going to look back at their lives and say, the reason why I was like that was because I was lazy. That's why. Because once you start putting the effort and the energy that is required to get past that, well, you get past it, And so that's an important element of it is understanding that your life is a product of what you are willing to do.
Okay, how would you describe a lazy person?
Well, this is the funny thing, we get emotional about this and have an emotional attachment to this. We see somebody who's a useless loser, and I'm not lazy, and what we mean by that is usually, insert thing that I like doing, and therefore I'm not lazy. The measurement of laziness is measured when it comes to things that you need to do that you don't want to do, and that really is the issue, right there of laziness. I know I should, I know I should go get a job, but I don't want to get out of bed, and go knocking on doors and filling out resumes and looking online. It's work, so I'd rather just collect unemployment. It's easier, but it's laziness. It's laziness when it comes right down to it, because because people who overcome that and they do start knocking on doors and they start looking for jobs and filling out resumes and going online or whatever they need to do, they end up getting a job. It's not, oh yes, my parents used to tell me, and I'm sure a lot of parents say this, but your job, when you're not employed, your job is to find a job, and so 8 hours a day, you're out looking for a job, because that's your job, not looking, every now and then some random thing, you see some help wanted and you think, oh, next week I'm going to go down there and maybe I'll see if they need me or not, and so you have to put work into it. You have to put effort into it in order to do that. And it's true of everything in life, anything, including Christianity. If you're not going to put any energy into it, then you're not going to get anything out of it. And that's always, my experience with most people who are in and out of Christianity, it is because they're lazy. And people who are up and down, like because what you were talking about, that some people are successful and some people are up and down or up and down. It is lazy, But like I said, we think of lazy as just laying around on a couch and not doing anything. No, it's that in order to be a Christian, there are things that you have to do, and that and if you're just not willing to do it, that it's, to me, it's funny because, people say, oh, I'm just struggling serving God or whatever, but I don't want to be what I used to be, but they go right back to it.
Yeah.
And the reason they go right back to it, because it takes zero energy.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything to go back to what you were before, because you're a professional whatever you were before. So it's not even an issue.
So last question about laziness, and then we'll move on. Where does laziness come from?
Well, I just mentioned it's just simply the, take everything that I've said, because it's the unwillingness to value things that you don't want to do is really what it comes down to. And if you look at the different scriptures in the Bible that talk about the issues of laziness, it's very interesting, because it's not just people who don't do work. It's people, it's often they have an excuse. When you look at the different scriptures, they have an excuse for why they don't need to do the thing that they need to do. The other thing is that they other people, several other people can tell them that this is a good thing or you should do this, and they stick with the thoughts of their own mind, because it's much easier to just agree with the random thoughts that run around the inside of your head than to actually do the real work of listening to somebody else and coming against those thoughts. And it's interesting. It is lazy thinking. People who are, that it's easy for them to believe in conspiracy theories is because they don't want to do the hard work of looking into things. Somebody somewhere who's reputable says, this, like the whole voter fraud thing. Here's this woman, Sydney, I think, whatever her name was, and what's his name, the president or the governor of New York a while back, Rudy Giuliani. And they're good to go. Oh no, this is there's been things are happening, and they're going to court after court after court, and they're looking at the evidence and saying there's just nothing here, and they're going no, let's go for this one. And they have 61. I think they had 61 cases, and only one case did actually win out of 61 cases, and this is going all over the country to different places, and it's like, well, how can somebody be that smart and be able to do so much in as governor, cleaning up New York, being a real, somebody who accomplishes things to chasing the wind like that, and it's easy because being lazy is not something that happens in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so a person is either lazy or they're not lazy. No, there's different opportunities for laziness, and you just it's easier to be lazy. You've got all these people saying, you're wrong. Well, how about just taking the time to listen to what they're saying, and that's why. So like I read, I read different books. I've read, lately I've read a bunch of books with people that I don't agree with, one after another, and I don't agree with them politically, but then mixed in there, I'm reading books by people who I don't think I'm going to agree with, and it was quite interesting to me because it's like, wow, I didn't want to read their book because I didn't think I would agree with their take on things, but then listening to them and thinking, oh no, I do agree with them. I agree with them and the decisions that they made. I probably wouldn't have gone down that road because I wasn't in 100% agreement, but I listened enough to say, I could have a friendship with this person. This is not something that would be a showstopper, and I've got friends like that. I've got friends from all kinds of walks of life, and but there are some people that, they when it comes to friends, they will only hang out with people that agree with them. And why is that? Why is it? I mean, they can have degrees, they can have good jobs, they can have other things. Well, they're just not willing to put in the effort that's necessary. They're just lazy when it comes to friendships. They would rather just have somebody who agrees with them, and then they don't have to worry about, disagreements. They don't have to worry about doing the hard work of, trying to see somebody else's point of view. I remember one time of a person, that was homosexual, making the statement of saying that the reason why they became a homosexual is because it was much easier. It's easier because you understand they're the same sex you are, so you think the same way, all of those things, so we're not having to work through the differences of the members of the opposite sex. And so and I thought that's an interesting thought, is that there's a laziness, associated with that, of not wanting to do the hard work that when you get into a relationship with the opposite sex, because it is hard work. I mean, there's no two ways about it. There's no such thing as the perfect spouse or partner, of the opposite sex. It's always going to be like, why in the world do they think that way? And if you get married, then you're going to be that way the rest of your life. And it is harder. It is genuinely harder. It is easier, when you're with somebody who thinks the same way that you do. And so, I'm throwing these things out to just, not because I'm trying to go after anything in particular, but just to show that the idea of laziness is not your classic, person who's just, dying of drug overdoses and has no job or no money, or, and is homeless. That's not the issue. The issue is much more nuanced than that.
So you mentioned something about value a second ago, and a question came in right before you mentioned that. But and so we'll ask the question here, and then we'll keep going with these points. But is wanting something badly enough the same as valuing something? Like, I value it enough to care for it, I want it badly enough to go after it?
No, not necessarily, because you can want something really badly that's out of your reach, and then spend your whole life obsessively trying to get it because you believe that you've discovered that's the holy grail. Once I have this, my life is going to be wonderful and I'm going to be able to live forever. That can actually be lazy because it could be the idea that you're going to do the one thing that's going to make life wonderful, and then you won't have to do anything anymore.
Okay, so let's talk about pride was another one that came. As we have pride, lack of understanding, and greed. Those are the 4 points that came in. Characteristics that keep us from doing what needs to be done. And we are at 7:45 on the dot. So let me just throw this in there that at 8 o'clock we will open it up. If you have any off-topic questions, anything random that you're thinking that you'd love to just toss out and chat about, you can throw that. You're going to start putting them in now.
So what was that? So pride?
So pride is the next one. Lack of understanding.
Okay, so lack of understanding has kind of been what I've been talking about. That really is a good way of describing laziness. Is a lack of understanding. I mean, that the one caters to the other. A lack of understanding creates laziness. Creates laziness because you don't understand the importance of the thing, and that's why you're not doing it. Because if you understood the importance, because it's like I said, it's not right down the road. It's not. It's not. I like when I was in school. I loved electronics class. I loved metal shop. I loved learning. I learned how to weld. That was back in the day when they actually taught you how to do things with your life after you got out of school. But we had your classic 4 quarters where we had metal shop, wood shop, auto mechanics. What was the 4th one? There was one other thing. What was that? I can't remember. Oh well, probably electronics. and I laugh because that's my favorite of the 4. It's like, oh, but but I love those. I didn't know anything about. I had been fixing cars because I had a car when I was 16, so I was fixing cars. I loved electronics, and I had a lot of that at home because of my dad, and so, but. I'd never welded before, never had a welding torch, and I love that. I love learning how to use a welding torch, and woodworking. Working with my hands in general. I just love doing that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff, and so that was easy. But there's nothing in me that wanted to do English or math was okay, but math was once we got into the routine of math, of learning, because we had to work everything out longhand. Our teachers believed that calculators were of the devil. And so, you had to work out everything longhand. So something that would have taken me like a minute on a calculator took me like 10 minutes, working out longhand. And so that then it just became too much work for the joy of coming up with the right answer. But and geography. I could care less about geography. What do I need geography for? I'm not going to be a pastor one day. What do I need that for? What do I need to know about history? I'm not going to be a writer.
So let's touch on pride for a second. We'd actually had this conversation when we were at Disneyland, and we were talking about being right, being wrong, and or going in a direction, and there being this we believe something, we think something, we're going down this direction, and we have all this there's this kickback, happening. And so there can be a mentality, and I kind of fessed up to that, being how I thought at one point, and knowing that there are, members of my family that thought the same way, and or not thought the same way, but were the same way. And so there being this, like, this it is pride, right down to the wire, but this is a certain expression of pride where you can see the evidence that you're wrong, yet fight and die on the battleground of defending yourself, because you will not admit you're wrong. And I told you that I remember thinking like that, and knowing I was wrong, and having situations where I was very clearly wrong, but I am not going to admit it. And I like to think I've changed in that area completely, but it was pride completely. And so clearly it totally kept me from advancing in many areas of life, because I was unwilling to just, okay, I'm wrong.
And see, and that's the funny thing about that, because I didn't struggle with that obviously everybody struggles with it to a degree, but because my dad always taught me that learning was a great thing. He would tell me, because he dropped out of school, and because he was a rude boy, running around. He was one of your classic, with the
first time I've ever heard you
with the cigarettes rolled up in the t-shirt. Yeah. He was one of those with the
slicked back hair,
slicked hair and everything. Yeah, he was hanging out on the car, the whole thing. That was my dad. And he really regretted it. He really regretted it.
Really?
Because after he got married, he didn't, and he got, there's not to be too TMI, but I was all of a sudden showed up, and there was 3 of us, but none of us were married. And
a greaser, that's the word I was looking for.
And so and so he would tell me, go to school, get your degree. You don't want to be struggling your whole life. Enjoy learning, and he always, even before he went, because he was doing night school, but even before he started doing night school, he always had books. Not books like, reading books. They were school books. Like he had books on math, and things like that, and he's like studying without going to school, which was a real weird concept to me, because it was like, so you're doing this like for fun?
Yes.
I do it because I have to. You do it for fun. It's like, but he was like, you're learning. You've got to learn. Because learning is everything, and so you have to learn. And that was the thing, is that I realized that my dad wasn't so worried about being right about things. In fact, I don't remember ever my dad, it comes to mind, no significant moments of, even with problems with with our family in other ways, I don't ever remember my dad fighting, for being right about something. In fact, he was just the opposite. Even if he was right about something and say, oh no, that's just a load of crap, he would just concede. He wouldn't get into it. And so, and getting saved at 20 years old, that was a real bonus for me, because, I became a Christian at the prime of life. It's a great thing. I'll tell you, you don't want to waste time living in sin, because it'll take you nowhere. Living for God and doing everything that God wants you to do, living your whole life for Jesus 100%, only keeps bearing fruit later on. And that was one of the things, is just learning, being right. Doesn't even matter, it doesn't even, your pride, this idea, and you hear people say, well, I've got my pride, and it's like, for me, and that's me, this is me personally, but for me it's like, then you've got nothing, because who cares about your pride? You're the only one. Nobody else cares about your pride. Nobody looks and goes, oh, now there's a guy that, he's full of pride. Nobody says that. You say, oh, that guy, he has pride in his work, but that's not the same thing. That's not. Yeah. You're not trying to rescue your ego. I'm gonna. Just the opposite. I'm gonna be. Industrious. That's not pride in that sort of way. But you hear these, they're stubborn, and and it just leads to nothing. And it's such a tragedy, for pride to be a reason for anything.
So the last one, we could really keep talking about that, couldn't we?
What, pride?
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about pride in general.
Well, the scripturally, the Bible says that it is the humble, that are the successes.
Yeah.
The prideful are the failures. And so, the more you invest in your pride, the more you're investing in your own failure.
Mm. Well, let's move to greed, which is the last one on here, because we talked about, you mentioned lack of understanding. But so greed is an interesting one. How would greed prevent us from doing what needs to be done? How does that play out in life?
I think they're all related to each other when you think about it, because greed, the idea of greed is an inordinate valuing of something, which is the same as not valuing something enough. Because if you value something too much, you still don't have the right value. And so, I read this book about Lisa Marie Presley and the daughter of Elvis, and she had everything that a person could ever want in life, but she was miserable, and ended up dying from her misery. I mean, for the most part, it's just she'd given up on life. She's only in her 40s. She had given up on life. She didn't see any point. My dad died. I think she said her dad was 45 or 50. I can't remember, but not old. And I've been there and gone. and she was like, what's the hope for me? And it was because she couldn't go where she wanted to go, because anywhere she goes, she have to take a security detail with her. She couldn't do any of the things that she wanted to be able to do, but yet she's got everything. I mean, she's got everything that people are greedy for: fame and fortune. She had it. She had fame, she had fortune, she had access to all of this, but yet it was a miserable life. And she ended up like your typical, partier, just partying her life away, because that was all that was available to her to be able to do without all the baggage that comes with it, So she has access to these things, but they're not, it's actually, when you are very, very wealthy, you're actually more limited than somebody who's, because if you don't have fame, you can go wherever you want. You can do whatever you want. It's not a big deal. You may not be able to afford to go wherever you want, but if you have the money, you can go there. But once you have the money to go there and people know who you are, you can't go there anymore. And so the idea of greed is blinding. That's the point that I'm making, is that greed is blinding. You think, if I can get all of this, then I will be happy, because we don't understand that all of that comes with a price. That there's another price that's associated with it, as I mentioned in your sermon that I mentioned about the wanting to take your daughter to an amusement park. You have to buy out the amusement park.
Yeah.
You can't just go like everybody else goes and enjoy one of the things that when we went to Disneyland, there's other people having fun at Disneyland.
Yeah.
It's not just you. I remember. It's not really related, but it gives you the idea. Is I had this slot car track, which I wanted forever. I always wanted a slot car track growing up. It's like, I want a slot car track, and I would put it together, or I finally got one, and it was one of these things where somebody was throwing it all away, and so it was like we got it. I mean, tons of track and everything. So I put all the track together. I'm using, and this is great. I'm fixing the cars. I'm learning how to do everything with it, and I'm thinking, you know what? I could have so much more fun if I just built the track permanently. And so, my dad helped me with it. I got some 4x8 sheets, screwed and drilled and made this track. Well, now it's the same track every single time I play with it. This miserable same. And I thought, I blew it. I've ruined it. I've ruined something that I enjoyed, because part of the fun of it was putting all the pieces together, and fixing stuff. That was part of the fun. Well, now I took all that out of there. So all the difficulty in doing that, I took all that out, and I took the fun out as well, and I didn't even realize it. And that's what greed does. Greed is like, if I could just get this. So you're putting all this effort and energy into a particular thing, and then you get that particular thing, and you realize this is not as exciting as I expected it was going to be. It seemed like it just promised so much more than it really delivered.
Well, that is like perfectly on time. We're at 7:59, and clearly
Not according to the clock up there. 8 o'clock.
See, that's
Probably have 2 seconds. What is it?
This is wrong. This clock is wrong. I'm telling you, it's wrong. Gone through this a few podcasts now. Well, I think the moral of the story is doing what needs to be done is clearly more rewarding. Like everything is actually. I was actually thinking about that the scripture where Solomon's talking about. I went by the field of a lazy man, and it's overgrown, but he's talking about a field. It's like this field should have fruit growing in it.
Right.
He would be benefiting from this fruit, both monetary and food and all the things he would get from this, but he doesn't want to work the field. So.
Yeah, between Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, you get the whole story.
Yeah.
All the things that we just talked about: greed, pride, and laziness, all mixed together.
Very cool. Well, we'll stop our topic there, and then we will jump off topic. We do have an off topic question in on the chat, and it is some time ago. The tree of life was mentioned in the podcast. The question is, why have it at all? Does it make sense? Or maybe that question was asked back then, is why have the tree of life at all? I think you're actually referring to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The question was, why have it at all?
Yeah.
Does it make sense that it was a test of obedience? God saying, you can have everything else, but will you obey me?
Well, you see, that's funny. Think about that, because this is something that I'm going to give you a tool here that's going to help you. Anybody listening, is that one of the difficult things that we have to realize, and why we have such a hard time with things, is because we really do believe that we're God, and because if you think about it, so God does something and we go, why did God do that? Well, where's that coming from? To question God, where's that coming from? It's coming from the fact that we feel that we're equal with God. We don't understand it, so obviously it doesn't make any sense that it would be the case. Why have a tree that's going to cause people to sin? And that's coming from our little pea brain, thinking. How about, I've got a great answer for that question. How about that God wanted to have a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he decided to create it? Is that a good enough reason? Or does he need a reason? Does he have to answer to us? And so it's these kinds of questions, they're good. It's not that they're not good questions. It's that the answer is because, like I always say about my kids, my kids growing up, why? Because you don't need any more answer. Because is an answer. Maybe I should I did a no is an answer. I'll do one because is an answer.
Yes, very good. I will make sure all my kids are in service. Nope, no toys, no coloring. You guys are listening to this one.
I mean, because is an answer. Because I want to. Not everything has to have this. Why make Pluto?
Yes. Why make asteroids?
Yeah, why make asteroids? I mean, how many things, we could literally sit here for years and years of all the things that God created and say, why did he create that? It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that. Because in our minds, everything has to have this purpose. If I was God, everything I did would be purposeful. I wouldn't do anything just because I wanted to. Ah!
Yeah.
We live our lives as lower creatures trying to do as much as we can do.
Yes.
For ourselves. We think we're going to somehow advance to this, selfless existence, And so because that's the answer. That's why God made the tree, because.
Very good. So, question answered.
Not the answer maybe that anybody'd be looking for, but it really is, it's just like, we try to, the way our minds work, and that's why I highly recommend people need to read. You need to read every book you can find about the mind. I don't care, just find one and read it. Everything you can find about the mind, because the less you know about how your own mind works, the less you understand life. You can't understand life without understanding that your mind is, I'd say, not exaggerating, I'd say probably 90% of our existence is worked out in our thinking. The other 10% is what happens to us.
Yeah.
And even that has to be processed.
Very good. Enough said. We will cap it off there for the night.
Is that it for questions?
No, that's it. That was the only one that came in. Very good. But I hope tonight was helpful, and as always, appreciate the questions.
So in that, since nobody else has asked anything, before you just finish it off, I would say go back and read the story, and you'll see. Because what does the Bible say? And the Lord God made a tree and put it in the garden. And that's it, that's it.
Why,
Yeah, he doesn't. It doesn't say. Is it on? God made the heavens and the earth. Well, how come God made the heavens and the earth? Why did he make earth anyway? Oh, I know why. He made it for me. That's right.
I was just going to say, the problem really comes down to when we think about things in terms of us.
Yeah.
That's what we always struggle with.
Yeah. And why did God make animals? Oh, so we could have something to have dominion over. But it's you look at it, and if you just forget about the sixth day and just go through the next few days and stop thinking about this the sixth day, God just made things because that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then he made man and put him in the thing, because he's looking at this going, yeah, I like this. This is good. This is good. He's paying attention to what he's doing. He's looking at all this and he's thinking, this is all really good. I really, really like this. And then while he's making things for himself, he thinks, I'm going to make man.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with God making a world for us, that somehow he just needed something there. We autonomize ourselves. It'd be like monetizing yourself. It's like, I'm worth money. I'm going to show you, I'm going to make myself valuable, monetarily. We autonomize ourselves. We put ourselves in these positions to where things have to work out with us in the middle, and it's like, it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. And the truth is, we didn't actually get into that, but the truth is that's what happened or happens to people who go back. They come into Christianity, they end up going back because it's about them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I've never seen a single person leave, go back into the world, turn away from Jesus, or go back to sin. I've never seen one person do that because they felt that this was the better thing to do for humanity. Or for God. It's always been, this is about me and I'm going to do this. And you just, and the result is you end up being less than you could have been, had you just done it God's way.
Follow-up question that just came in. So asking why God can come from a place of pride.
Asking why, should, ask God why, and then it won't come from a place of why. Ask God, why? Okay, why did you create this? I want to understand this. And don't throw in answers. Your brain, that again, reading, you need to understand as soon as you ask why, your brain's going to start giving you answers. Mm-hmm. It's just going to. because that's how the brain works. It just gives you answers. And then we sit there and we think we're actually third person to this, and actually we're just schizophrenic. is we're sitting there and we're going, I never thought of that before. Where did that thought come from? Your head. That's where it came from. It came from your head.
A lot different than pride there.
And because you have it's not so much a pride, it's the way we work.
Yeah.
It's how it works. The pride is to think it came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is that there's a part of our brain that comes up with an idea, and then there's another part of our brain that says amen. It's just the way things work. It's the way our brain works. Our brain, I mean, we're not even just a dual personality. We're multiple personalities. And that's why, well, it's a whole nother story. We won't go there. But that's why you have so much mental illness, is simply because people don't understand what's going on in their own head.
Illness. I'm feeling a podcast topic.
Yeah,
come up
mental, for the most part, mental illness, when you look at it, and if you be honest and objective, mental illness is more often than not, the issue of mental illness is people who don't understand how their own brain works. They just don't. Now, whether there's some physical reason for that is not my point. The point is, if you don't understand, you can't. Because one of the things that I thought was interesting in several books that I've read, they say, if you think you're crazy, you're not as crazy as you think you are. The people that are really crazy are the ones that don't think they're crazy and are crazy. Those are the scary ones. So
that's quite encouraging, actually.
See, if you know things about yourself, if you know your weaknesses and you admit your weaknesses, people who are just not unwilling to admit their weaknesses, they are crazy, and they're the dangerous crazy. But people who admit their weaknesses, they're willing to admit when they're wrong, they're willing to do that. They're the most sober amongst us all, and they're the ones who are going to go further because they have an honest opinion of themselves. So that's my 11 minutes worth.
Well, sorry, I'm just
4 minutes.
I'm just titling
your next
podcast.
Your next podcast. Are you really crazy?
How to know if you have mental illness?
How do you know if you're crazy?
I'm gonna find a way to shorten that, but I'm totally doing this. We're gonna do this. Maybe not the next one, but
fine.
Coming soon.
Fine then.
The truth
Talk
of
about
mental illness.
I'll be able to
Very
tell you
good.
all about all the books I've read.
Recently,
because I don't
too.
know anything about. The only
Your
thing I
recent
know.
books.
The only thing I know about mental illness is what goes on in my own mind, and I am a professional when it comes to my own mental illness.
Very good.
I'm an expert in my own mental illness.
This is gonna be a fun one, I think. Just plug now. We should start doing
I know what I am. I tell people all the time, I do this because I'm OCD. I do this because I have ADHD.
Because you're a highly functioning sociopath.
I'm a highly functioning sociopath. I know all my mental illness.
Yes, and I've been around you long enough
I
to
know
hear you
I'm
confess them all.
I know I'm crazy. That's the good news.
But you just said that means you're not as crazy as you think you are.
Well, that's
So
my
now we have a
hope.
conflict.
That's my hope.
All right. Well, we will be here again next week. Maybe we'll talk about mental illness. I don't know. We'll see. It depends on how fast and good the thoughts come into my own head. So this is going to be a weird one, I think. Anyway, we'll be here again next week, and we do have our midweek service tomorrow night, and we really do encourage you, if you're in the local area, to come in person. We'd love to meet you. If you haven't been to a service, if you haven't been in a while, come back, and let's have a good time together. But again, like I said, we'll be here again next week. We do have some events coming up soon. We've got a concert on the 5th. That's in 2 weeks. So if you have time to make plans, come. It's on the 5th. It's at 7:30, and it'll be here at our church building. And so some information will be on the screen here in a second. But once again, we'd love to meet you in person. And at the very least, we will be here again next week. You will see our faces, hear our voices, and hopefully we will see your comments and questions.
Don't read it. Just move on.
I'm starting to learn. There's a certain name that comes in at the very end. Let it go. Have a good night, folks. We'll see you next week.
Happy birthday, Mariah.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
That should have been the beginning. That could have been the intro.
All right.
Happy birthday, Mariah.